To this one? Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, the voices.
Well, we'll be last up.
Oh.
That's good shit. So Mel is the clicker. If you want to use that.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for coming to see us this afternoon. My name's Melinda Buxton. I work for Telstra. I'm a program director. I spoke briefly this morning, program director leading strategic technology uplift in Telstra. Telstra is Australia's largest telecommunications company, one of our largest technologists in the industry right now, and we are embarking on a very quick run to uplift the technology and the experience that our customers are receiving from us as a telecommunications company and as a premium technologist. We are partnering right now with Versent to implement a phenomenal stack of ping technology to uplift our customer experience in a very short period of time. And this afternoon the team here are going to speak to you about how we've created that, how we did it very fast, how we did it at scale, some of the great stuff that we learned, and some of the great stuff that we probably will do a little bit differently next time. Very briefly, from a Telstra perspective, we, 18 months ago, Telstra aligned on our vision to be a world-class technology company that empowers people to connect, which is a very broad statement, is a very deep vision, and the strength of the vision in technology was the organisation's first step forward. When it was handed to the technologists, we kind of unpacked that as an organisational vision and said, what does that actually mean for us? What does it mean we need to do differently? And we first focused on the connectivity. So to understand what connecting with Telstra meant, we spoke with our customers. And in developing digital applications, we often start with a customer experience. We start with customer experience and sentiment testing. And interesting. This is what our customers said. And some of this will not be a surprise to any of you in the room. Our systems are very much the same as everyone else who is managing multiple legacy identity management stacks. We found 9 separate siloed legacy platforms for identity management in Telstra, which meant our customers had up to 5 different credentials at a time. We had 72 different credential combinations that our customers could use to log in and authenticate with Telstra. And this is the experience they were receiving. From an organisational perspective, the pieces that hit us the hardest were that our customers were telling us that they thought our direction and our organisation was misvalued. And that, for an organisation who were putting all of our effort into an uplift of experience, hit us really, really hard. And all of our focus then moved directly to authentication and how our customers experience Telstra the first time they hit us, every time they hit us. So we aligned on the challenges, we went a little bit deeper, we found some more challenges, we put together a vision that we already had, which was the world-class technology company that empowers people to connect. We then developed a strategy for authentication, and our strategy is to create a trusted, simple and personal way to access Telstra's services, solutions and experiences. And to do that, we built 4 goals. And our 4 strategic goals are to create a strategic Telstra customer identity management capability, enabling a brilliant experience for our customers. To provide a strategic Telstra enterprise identity management capability, enabling a brilliant experience for our people. To remediate the legacy system impact on our customer experience. And to mature persistent agile delivery of exceptional customer-centric solutions. This is the key to ensuring that we were creating something that would work at the end, that would meet the use case we were looking for, that our people could align to, and that our organisation would maintain focus on for long enough to ensure we were successful. And anyone implementing this type of scale in the size of organisation that we're trying to mobilise at the speed that we're trying to mobilise it will understand that if the organisation quivers and loses focus over that period of time, your scope will be reduced, your scope will be changed, your funding will be reduced, people will lose attention and they'll start to look at the next big problem, because there's always a next big problem. And our focus from the beginning was on an understanding that globally the challenges we have been solved. The technology works. There are people, very brilliant people all across the world doing exactly what we need to do every day. We don't need to reinvent the technology. We don't need to prove the technology works. We need our organisation to understand that rapid build in the technical space is what our customers need for the experience that they're looking for, and that the rest of the organisation doesn't need to worry about the technology working. They need to worry about what they're going to do with it when we turn it on. So, so our focus was on, purely from a delivery perspective, keeping the organisation at bay, keeping them focused on what it is they need when we finish this, and building it as rapidly as we possibly can. So this is the team of brilliant people that we chose to partner with to build it as rapidly as we possibly can, while our teams were focused on ensuring that when it was built, when it's ready and when it's working, we're ready to turn it on, we're ready for our customers to start adopting it, and we're ready to start driving value from that for the organisation. And that's how you can be successful in this space. I'm very frequently asked how you do that, and the most common questions we get are how you get senior stakeholder buy-in, how you get the funding, how you get marketing people to listen to security, how you get technology people to speak about technology in a way that an organisation will understand. And this is our strategic execution action plan that for this scale of implementation I would always follow, and I would say is always successful, and is absolutely been the underlying success for what we've done. The first is to understand the organisational vision and to ensure that everyone that you're working with understands that the organisational vision is what you are working toward and what they are working toward, and that it is a common goal. To define your strategy, because once you know what your strategy is, you have a true north, and every decision that is made going forward will be aligned back to the strategic direction that you're heading in, and then your goals are built on top of that. The strength for us and for all of our teams and all of this team's teams who are working on the floor now is that every person working on this piece of work understands that every piece of work that they're doing on a weekly basis rolls up to one of these goals, rolls up to our strategy, rolls up to our organisational vision, and they understand the value that they're contributing for the organisation on a daily basis, regardless of whether that is writing a short piece of code or implementing change or understanding how we unpack applications. Regardless of the level of work they're doing, they understand that they're contributing to the vision and that they're uplifting customer experience in every technical interaction. And that's why this is successful, and that's why this plan is so powerful. And the communication, I will close on, I will say, is the key. So the technology will work if you do it well and you automate it at the way that we have done. The technology will work very, very fast. If you lose organisational focus, it won't matter what you've built, because they won't be ready to use it and they won't use it in the right way. So communication is actually the key to ensuring that you will be successful. And communication, I always tell everyone that you need to be both consistent and persistent in that communication, because at an enterprise level, you are fighting for money with a lot of other very important pieces of work, and that fight is consistent. And your communication for the power of the work that you're doing needs to be as consistent over the period that your technical teams are building. So on that, I will hand over to Thor.
Thanks. Thank you, Mel. So my name is Thor Essman. I'm the CEO and founder of Versent, and we've been chosen by Telstra to be their integrator for this program in Australia. So there's communicating the message, and then there's getting people to understand what you're trying to do. So we've come up with some terminology that we've used both for the technical and the non-technical audiences to try to really come to grips why all this stuff is important. It certainly is in Australia, and I'm sure it is here. This concept of NPS is a massive driver of change. And as you heard in the keynote today from Andre, seconds now matter. You now have not just the 3 seconds that we used to expect in web, but as things are moving to more device-driven, particularly voice-driven, you now have less than a second. So we're fighting for the milliseconds now. And in that millisecond, you will change my view of recommending you or not. And when you lose them in a millisecond, it takes a lot longer to get them back. So you have to get it right the first time. Just a bit about Versent. We are a pretty quick-growing business down in Australia. We have also offices in Singapore as well, and we're opening the US shortly. Our three major specialities are ping, on Amazon, and deep engagement into the API layer. And that's the only things we do. So I want to talk a little bit about how identity actually changes the experience. I think we all know this, but when I was sort of reflecting on building the speech a few months ago, identity isn't necessarily called sexy very often. It's usually things that people forget about. So I tried to sort of bring it up a level. And how do you win in the age of experience? So most of our companies we work with will be really concerned about their brand. And what is your experience and how do you relate that? We've for years thought about customer experience, particularly in our front end of digital, and how well, how simple, how clean, how easy. Down in our systems, particularly for internal uses, are they natural, are they simple? Do you have to have lots of training for people to use it? And in the age of APIs, DX has become a thing, actually trying to really cater to developers for easy to use, this is a life of its own. Easy to use, easy to document, and easy to understand APIs is really important, but we think the magic in the middle is IX, identity experience. These are the things that actually ties the whole chain of experience together, because it actually is the one thing that actually lets you know who I am. And if you know who I am in that millisecond, you're going to be able to interact with me in a way that is more complete and more holistic with your brand than if it's not personalized. This is just my definition. Feel free to steal it and put it on Wikipedia if you choose. It is the individual's emotions and attitudes while they're using their identity with an entire ecosystem, a system, or a device. So I might cross different ecosystems, but if I do that and I'm traversing it starting with you, you inherit how well that experience is going to be on your brand. So as more companies start to do things like B2B relationships or allowing you access through their brand to other brands, particularly partners and sub-partners, it's important that you understand you are responsible for the whole chain. It has to be transparent. It has to be easier to use than avoid, because if it's hard, I'm just not going to do it, let's be honest. And it has to grow with as I use it. It has to evolve with me. And some of the exciting stuff you heard Andre talk about, particularly intelligence, is I think this is really where that's going to grow. We look at the elements of identity experience as the device. Now, there's never been more devices in the history of humankind. The proliferation of those devices as we get into sensory and IoT is going to be overwhelming. So we're going to have something that traverses that. And in my own household, I have 3 children. I think I have 7 different devices for 3 children, 2 adults, not including my work devices. Each one has to be registered to me. I had an awesome experience where I'm here, my daughter's in Australia. She went into her room, she called Dad to the little Alexa Echo, and she called me straight off while I was here, and it just worked. So some of those experiences, they need to be device driven. It's then the flow. As that flow happens, if you consider that particular example, while that's easy and not necessarily need to know who I am in the moment, but have sort of pre-authorized that those 2 devices can talk to each other, what happens if I said, hey Alexa, book me a haircut? Now that may not be monetary in value, but that may be something I'll need to know something about myself and something about the target to be able to actually exercise and action that, but perhaps not as sensitive as if I said, Alexa, please buy me that Tide or buy me that particular thing online. Now I have to have quite a lot of sensitive information. I have to have a different level of privilege, and that flow will be different in each part of the experience. We talk about the standards, new standards becoming, and if anyone tried to get into the OAuth session yesterday, it was packed through the door, so clearly standards are popular. But actually applying to those standards makes a lot of this easy. And my one guidance, if you remember nothing else that I've said, is don't be special. Don't be different. Just take the standard. The behavior, and here's where the intelligence will come more and more into how we behave and changing and modifying my identity experience through actually analyzing my behaviors. And finally, my profile has to grow with me. It would be really great if I can take some of that with me. It'd be really great if I could say, and I am an avid user of a voice, hey, I'm going on holiday for 2 weeks. Can you tell the post office to hold my mail? And all those things that I'd like to be able to build in my profile, that perhaps when I go to the hotel here in Boston, they know I like a firm pillow, I like CNN, and I like to have the room at this temperature. That would be a great experience that can carry with me wherever I happen to go. But we're really only at the beginning. I talk about voice a lot, particularly in Australia. It's become almost one of the de facto channels, and it's starting to threaten mobile for some screen time and interface time, and that'll be interesting to watch. Facial becomes another one. We obviously already do that with our phones for basic biometrics, but as this proliferates through physical access and other things, it's going to get quite interesting. And one that is playing out particularly now is avatar experience, where I can be represented by things like Sumerian in AWS as a separate avatar. And you combine that things with natural language and as well as language translation, and things get very interesting in terms of how you can represent yourself physically and digitally. So the actual world, when these things start coming together, is going to be quite challenging. And again, you're fighting for that half a second or that millisecond. So doing things in this channel have even less tolerance for delay. And as such, you really have to focus on that end-to-end identity experience. So again, we think IX is the magic in the middle. It really is what truly connects the experience between CX, UX, and DX. And for us, we think it's the last piece you actually need in that puzzle we've been talking about for a very long time to actually know your customer. Now with that, I'm going to hand over to my team here, and they're going to show you some of the automation that we've done for this program. Have fun, boys.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that, Thor. Some great insight into the identity experience. Hi, everyone. We're just going to go through some of the achievements that we've got here today. It's going to be a little more technical, going through the actual automation pipeline, some key principles and the day in the pipe. We'll just be talking about the architected identity automation with Australia's largest telecommunications company, Telstra. Quick introduction, I'm Jacob, and here's my colleague, Ewan. We both work at Versent, as Thor alluded, and have led many identity engagements across several different business sectors. Along a journey, we've had many frustrations with a lot of rework and these tedious tasks that have been repeated on each engagement. Like things like prepping your SOE, things like setting up your directory structure, doing base installs, general configuration, following the 80-20 rule, where you end up spending 80% of your initial time doing 20% of the actual work required. With each one of these annoyances, we have this renewed drive for getting automation done right. And this is where our passion for automation is born. We, like many others here today, we get the sense of value when investing upfront time and effort into automation, with the knowledge that having the automation there gives us that driven development framework that alleviates this from our 80% rule. We proceeded to continuously develop deployment and integration patterns. We have these passionate engineers who are continuously developing these patterns, and all we needed was this company to come along and have the foresight and similarly the vision to allow us to pool our knowledge to achieve this outcome, this amazing outcome. That was able to give us business value, and not only that, but customer value. Telstra was one of the first ones to come along with this drive to allow our engineers to focus on the development of the platform that allows us to replace these various technologies that have accumulated over time and become this incumbent identity solution. So today we'd like to talk about those platforms, the key architecture principles, going through that day of the life of the pipe, and to help us walk you guys through this journey, we want to talk about the 6 W's. As you know, the 6 W's are who, what, where, when, why, and how. So we're going to start with the what. The what is the identity platform. This is a robust, auto-deploying, auto-healing, auto-scaling solution that services millions of customers for Australia's biggest telecommunication services, Telstra, that has a deployment time of from a git commit all the way through to production through a minimum 4 environments into approximately 7 hours. So that's an amazing achievement. I mean, that's a small amount of time to get all the way from your personal laptop all the way up into production. Pivoting off the what is the who, and as you may have worked out, collaborative effort with Telstra here and Versent has been key in helping us achieve this amazing outcome. The where was important early on. we needed somewhere that was flexible and agile in both delivery and deployment. This was easy for Versent due to our strong ties with the AWS platform, and also their Telstra is very robust and able to get us into that position that we needed to be in. So I'm just going to pass over to Ewan, who's probably going to go through the platform mentality and able to walk us through some of those whys.
Yep, so one of our key principles was to make sure we had a platform focus. And to start off with that, we had our ABCs, which are your audit, your build, and your control accounts. This afforded us the ability to have separation of duties. And with the audit account there, we had a point to aggregate all your logging, as well as your alerting and your alarming. From this account, you can publish that to your dashboarding tools like Splunk or Sumo Logic. Then your build account allows for consistent environments. So you're deploying from one location to your dev, to your sit, to your UAT, to production. And it gave you one point of control to make sure that those environments were deployed consistently and in a controlled fashion. The last one there is the control account. This account is required mainly for security practices, so we want to ensure that we're following some best practices suggested by AWS with their secure secure AWS account structure. This control account gives you the ability to control your inbound access, your cross-account roles, and integration with your staff IDP. So moving along, you've got enhanced security posture with this control account. One of the other features was integrating the build process with code scanning tools so that we can ensure best practices across that and catching any vulnerabilities early on. Did you want to mention anything more about the security enhancements?
Yeah, it gives us that centralized consistency in our build and deployment mechanisms. So we go into detail about this a little bit more down the track when we go through the actual pipelines. But it gives us that posture across both external and internal networks. We can have effective controls that govern those pathways, and our integrations meeting most of those basic security department-based requirements. We also have this strong opinion around patterns. This is why we attend Identiverse, because there's a lot of that going around here. There's what's happening right now and what's going to happen next. It gives us that the ability to look at those patterns, get that single integration point that applications then can consume. And it doesn't mean that you have these special snowflakes that sit around. Much like Thor was talking about before, these special snowflakes often cause issues with integration times and delivery. So we try and stick to patterns and standards as much as possible. Let's go on to next. We've got the automation-driven development. We wanted to explain through why we went through the automation-driven development and why we wanted to make this a mandatory thing for our developers as well as the general platform. Do you want to quickly pivot on for that? Explain why we...
Yep, so one of the key things was we had to trust the robots. We don't trust humans because we make mistakes. Robots tend to do what they're told, well, at least for now anyway. So with the ability to, through that build account, through consistent builds, trusting the robots there to do your deployments, managing that from a single git commit, triggering that to build your environments, as well as test those environments and progress that code base to the next level. So with trusting the robots, like I said, you get that consistency, which brings me to the next one. And I'll flick over to you for that one.
Yeah, so consistency is key with our automation-driven development. We want to make sure that our environments were homogeneous, that it allows us to have a simpler path between the environments and allows a simpler way to promote code. It increases also the security posture, as there's no need for anyone to actually log into the actual individual environments to change anything. It's actually a fact. If someone was to log into our environments, that would be then flagged for a breach. And we would actually quarantine that server and go, why has someone logged into the server, and get our SOC to respond to it and actually destroy, and actually analyze and investigate, and then decommission that server. So that's quite interesting. Do you want to just go through some of the developer experience? Oh, no.
Let's not skip
The,
so far ahead.
It's that sticky button.
Yeah, so with this developer experience, slightly different to what most people consider developer experience, which is we're focusing on the internal developers of the platform. So as developers of that platform, we wanted it to be easy to onboard new developers to help us out, and ensuring that they had an environment that allowed them to develop at their own pace, as well as develop interesting features that they wanted to play with. So to do this, we gave them the ability to deploy their own environments that, following that consistency, ensured that it was exactly the same as production, but without the production data. This gives them the ability to integrate early and catch a lot of issues before it even makes it to the SIT environment. One of the other cool ones with this is the ability to do proof of concepts. So both for the internal developers as well as onboarding applications. So before an application wants to make it into the onboarding pipeline, there's a couple checks and balances it needs to go through. So there might be a couple big applications that want to come on, or even some of the smaller ones that want to improve that customer experience or user experience flows. And they want to test a couple different concepts in that space. But they need it to be integrated with your identity platform to uplift that process. So yeah, with the ability to spin up those proof of concept environments, you're enabling the business to innovate a lot more efficiently.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool feature because it just means that when you start day one, you first rock up to work, you read through the doco, you can hit a big yellow button that says deploy my environment, and you get your own little personal environment in like 20 minutes. So you can just start reading the doco and then pivot straight into personal environment and start playing around to find out what the platform does, what its little breaking points are, and where you can find out, the good little bits in there. So it's really, really awesome stuff there. So looking at the next one for the W's, we have the when. So we kicked off this engagement starting discovery early August, and we had a first consumer application deployed onto the platform mid-December. So as Thor was talking or alluding to in the keynote, that was a 4-month engagement that we keep on kicking on, and yeah, it was some great work done there in a quick amount of time to be able to get this actual identity platform live.
Yeah. So that was 16 weeks from discovery to production. So it was a pretty great effort by the engineering team, even if we are patting ourselves on the back a little bit. But there are some other guys back in Australia that really put in long hours to make sure that was achieved.
A lot of hard work. So on to the how now is the last one. How do we manage to make a robust identity platform that was able to scale out both vertically and horizontally? And so we're going to run you through that now. We're going to run you through the day of deployment, what we like to name bake, boot, and blitz. And yeah. So we've got the sticky key again.
And just like that,
That's
how
fast
quick it is.
Thank you very much. We're done. So this is our current platform. We want to deploy a new feature. So let's say we rock up, we've developed a new feature and we want to go ahead and deploy that new feature. So we start by pushing a git commit to the release branch. This then triggers off a release, which is the first phase, which is the bake stage. This process then first prepares, patches and tunes the OS into the bronze-based AMI, and then downloads the security-based monitoring applications and puts that on top of the bronze to make the silver AMI, and then takes the actual application, the ping applications, and puts that on top to make our final golden AMI. Now this golden AMI is then sent to the target accounts along with the configuration package, and that sets up for the bake phase. So at the end of that, we have a one-time bake that we can then distribute across the environments, as it's an environment agnostic bake package. So the boot phase is up next. As you can see, we start deploying the new platform. This starts with the CloudFormation templates. It kicks on, sticky keys again. So as you see, it starts deploying the new platform. The CloudFormation templates kick off. It starts by allocating the AWS resources, such as the ELBs, the auto-scaling group, and the security groups. And then the pre-baked AMIs are executed. The user data is then leveraging Ansible to pull down information from S3, as well as CredStash, which is our secret key management tool. This then pulls down that information and sets up those ping directory servers through the various configuration endpoints. So this is the data tier layer now we've got deployed. We want to then retrieve that from, it doesn't have any records in it at the moment, so we want to go ahead and retrieve it from the existing stack. Now there's two approaches to do this. We can either directly connect these ping directory stacks with the other ping directory stacks and just replicate the agreements across, or we can go ahead and set it up with a more complex solution. So we're going with the more complex solution for today, as you see in the video. So what we do is we actually set up a ping directory sync stack that is able to connect to the old stack and actually pull that users across while being able to transform, cleanse the identity records. Now, you want to just go through why that's a really powerful tool set?
Yep, so basically using this tool to blue-green those directories allows you to not only transform your data on the way through, but cleanse it. You can also use it to deduplicate any identity records that may be in a legacy system. And you may be in the middle of a migration. So using something like this, you can add some smarts into data sync. It's really configurable. And basically through that process, you get the ability to transform and bring that data across. And you can also run a couple of tests. So we've got some unit tests at this phase where we'll write a couple of accounts to the source and ensure those accounts are brought across in the right structure that we wanted. And through this process, you also get the ability to transform your schema, which means you can remove legacy attributes, allowing you to cleanse that data and decrease the bloat of your directory.
Yeah, it's all about cleansing to make sure that the data inside the directory remains as pure as possible. There's often big identity engagements that we're in where we go through and we actually look through the identity records and we ask the question why this is here, why this is here, and often the time is, I don't know. This tool here makes that amazing. You can go through and go, we can remove this, and this, and actually reduces the size of the identity record. So it actually reduces the size of the identity record, reduces the amount of servers we need to spin up, because it's obviously a small identity record, and reduces the actual business cost of running those additional servers. So now we've got the synchronization between the old platform and the new platform. We actually had a requirement to actually pull in additional data sources from external regions. So we're going to go ahead and set up another layer. So this is the actual external synchronization layer. So that will reach out. It's the same server base. We've got the instances booting automatically with the EC2 auto scaling groups and the boots from the pre-shared AMIs and the configuration from S3. And it goes ahead and pulls down those users from the external sources and goes ahead and does that transformation as well on those guys. Then populates that in the directory, and then that concludes our data tier. I mean, do you want to have a quick brief chat about this one as well?
On that one there, we also have the ability to do a data integrity check, so ensuring what we've blue-greened across and what we've got in the legacy systems, they're all aligned. So again, if you're in that migration state where you need to maintain currently 2 different identity solutions potentially, you can make sure your data is consistent across both platforms. Moving on to the next one.
So we've got the data prepped in the platform now. So now we're going to set off to the next layer, which is the application tier. Again, we start by applying the CloudFormation templates. This will spin up the ELBs instances and also the auto scaling and security groups. In this tier, we've got the ping federate in this case. We've got the ping federate admin servers coming up first, which we then configure using the ping federate admin APIs. There is the majority of the ping federate admin APIs covers all the use cases that we have. There is one, however, that is missing. The ping federate admin password that we had to sort of get ourselves around. We can't actually set a new password without going through the GUI, which obviously doesn't suit our means. So we had to write a little specific Python helper tool that allows us to set our own password for ping federate using their hashing method. It's actually interesting because when we actually did this, we noticed that there was a couple of iterations you can use for the password hash. The default was set to something like 4, so we just cranked it up to 7. So technically, our ping federate admin has a stronger password than the default ones that normally come out of the box. So that's quite an interesting little tidbit there. So once we've set that up, we then pull that information from the admin server, and then we store it in S3, and then we allow that information to go to the runtime engines. And those guys set up, and then they connect with the data layer, and they're all ready to go. And then it moves on to the next phase, which we then set up with the, now that we have the identity provider and the data layer humming, we're going to then use the, give the users and applications the ability to retrieve their information from the directory. So do you want to just go run through this one?
Yep, so this is the data broker layer. So here we're leveraging the Ping data governance product to expose a SCIM endpoint to interact with that directory. The nice thing about this application is it's stateless, so it made it for easy automation. We didn't have to worry about cluster discovery like we had to do with directory and work out replication agreements or anything like that. So with the fact that it's stateless and it's exposing that SCIM endpoint, another powerful tool within the DataGov product is the policy engine. This allows us to hook into Ping Federate to validate tokens, get scopes, and apply certain logic around those different policy information points. Moving on to the next one.
So lucky last, we have the gateway layer. So following the exact same process as everything else, we kick off those ELBs, we kick off the auto-scaling, auto-scaling groups and the security groups, and then we start by deploying the actual servers. So those pre-shared AMIs will come up, they'll start pulling down the configuration from S3, they'll boot the admin first, be able to configure that admin through all the APIs, and then be able to pull out that information, store it into S3, and then deploy it to the rest of the runtime engines. So there's an interesting little fact here around the health checks and the key management tool that you had to sort of work around a little bit there.
Yep, so Ping Access being slightly different to Ping Fed with its interactions with the admin console. So they need to constantly poll the admin console for new config. And the admin console actually does a health check on those runtime nodes as well. So with auto-healing events, you run into an issue where your admin console is reporting failed nodes, which will mess with your alerting and your alarming framework. So as part of springing up a new node, we actually do a cluster discovery at this point, as well as a health check on the admin server to see what the cluster state is recorded there, and we'll clean up any nodes that aren't supposed to be there because they've auto-healed, and report on any nodes that are in the cluster and are reporting healthy, but on the admin node are reporting unhealthy.
Cool, so that was the last one there. So after that happens, we now have our full stack, sitting right next to the existing stack. Each component has its own unit tests. We go through and we test each component as we deploy it. We go test the layer as well with our regression tests on the actual layer, and then we test the layers against each other. So now that we're left with, this is the boot phase completed. Now we're left with the two stacks side by side. We're now ready to do the blitz phase. So the blitz phase is simply, we're going to go ahead and start by adding the ELB's instance into the AWS's Route 53 DNS service, so that we can start doing our synthetic transactions against this new stack. Now, once we start doing these synthetic transactions, it's going to start capturing 80% of the use cases and the ability to determine if there's an issue with the stack or there's some misconfiguration in the Git repository or something along those lines, and then we can start analyzing that sort of stuff before we actually turn it on. But once that's all good, we have all those synthetic transactions working, we can now move on to starting doing canary deployment. So the canary deployment means that we slowly migrate the traffic across. As you can see, there's an 80% routed, 0% routed. You'll see that the traffic slowly migrated across, and this is because 80% of those cases that you have for synthetic transactions aren't going to capture your full user base. You've got live data in there, and only when alarming, alerting, and monitoring services start picking up that live data is actually being tampered and people are getting the incorrect responses, then you actually know that there's actually a failure and you'll be able to switch back immediately. This means we would roll back and we would just immediately get rid of the new stack and we'd pivot all the traffic back to the old stack. So in this case, that hasn't happened. It's all good. We're ready to go, and we'll go ahead and start to decommission all of the links. So we get rid of all the links, and then now we don't need that in the old stack, so we just say goodbye to it. We blow it away, get rid of it. We don't need it anymore. So now we have a fresh platform that's been deployed during operation hours with no downtime to the end consumer, which is pretty cool. Remembering this is cattle, not pets, so all of these instances are auto-scaling. If some amount of load comes through and volumes come through, we can scale out each of the instances to accommodate for that, and as well as auto healing. So if any of these servers report unhealthy for any of the scanners on the servers, we can then just shoot those servers immediately and bring them back up with the with all the configuration ready to rock and roll, and really quickly, because it's all pre-shared AMIs and the configuration's already there. So what's next on the cards? Do you want to chat about this one?
So now we've got this sexy platform, auto healing, auto scaling, auto deploying. What else do we need? One of the big things we want to do is we want to bring in a portal to drive onboarding of new applications or onboarding of new consumers. So that's both within the organization and potentially looking at third party in the public space. So in this space here, one of the primary focuses for driving this is ideally we want to try to remove that top-down mandate approach for bringing in new identity platforms or driving different business units and integrating with those with the new platform. So through that, we'd like the different business units to want to integrate with us. So we need to improve that developer experience to make sure we have got a guided approach to integrating using our patterns, rather than just pointing to some standards documentation and going, read that, work it out, and come on board. So yeah, we want to improve that process and make the different applications want to come on, because it's going to be easier for them and it's going to improve their customer experience, their customers' experience, with rather than them having to manage their own identity solutions or their own little workarounds that they may have in place. So yeah, we want to drive them to use our platform through improving that developer experience. Leveraging another tool within the space, which would be creating a UX and a CX feedback loop, so that the consumers will have insights into what the platform's doing, how they're using the platform, and how their customers are using the platform. So the idea through that is to ensure that they have the knowledge to go back to the business and show value within the platform, and also gives us insights into how they're using the platform, what some of the gaps may be within that, and through working with them, ideally driving that platform's roadmap. So we're closely working with our consumers to making sure we meet their needs.
Yep, and the next one we have up there on the agenda is adaptive authentication. So we're looking to heavily use AWS's machine learning potentially to leverage that powerful tool set to determine at authentication time, the general context of how the user is trying to authenticate and whether the authentication is valid or fake. So using the various inputs, we can then extend it out, not just using username, password. We can then extend out to how they're actually trying to log in, how many times a day they're trying to log into it, how often they normally do this pattern-based matching, as well as giving a risk profile as well, giving the customer the ability to determine what risk profile they want their account to set at. If you're using a high-risk account for billing, for instance, you could set that to high risk because that's a sensitive information. Whereas if you're using an account just to check your blogs every day, it's probably a low-risk account that you don't need to do all this extensive checking and matching. But yeah, so hopefully this gives some businesses insight into how identity customer platforms can be, and how identity customers can have the ability to handle amounts of load in an auto-scaling capacity, as well as some of the security mechanisms that can be afforded when we allow the quarantine servers from the pools, from the operations pools, and have them replaced quickly with no outages or impact to performance. We hope you liked the demonstration, and if you'd like, you can ask any questions. So we'll be up here. I think we've got a few more minutes left.
I might just do just a minute on closing on the key statements, and then we'll jump to the questions in a sec. So things to remember out of this speech: clarity of vision. Be very clear what you're trying to achieve. Consistently communicate it. And you heard that from Mel, you heard it from me, but you also heard it from the guys when they talked about how they make it easy for all the developers to play with environments, participate, to learn, to test, to try. That flexibility that the automation gives you, or the usage on top of a consumption-based environment like cloud, that is the cultural change. we have to play with things to start to understand them, and giving them to highly resistant teams, they can touch it, they can taste it, they can feel it. From the clarity of the vision, to the clarity of the purpose, to the clarity of seeing it with their own two hands, that's how you change a culture. And much of this is very resistant, because you're changing things that have been there for many, many, many years. So you have to use all of the tools that you have, but most of all, don't be special. Set a standard, live by that standard, and execute to that standard. Questions?
What did you guys build this on? So what's your automation platform? What testing engine? Monitoring?
What's the stack?
What's the stack?
Yep.
For it.
So it's all built on Amazon. So we've tried to keep Amazon native as much as we could. We do use GitHub, which is probably the one deviation, I think, out of the deployment side of things. So we use code pipeline and code build to provision everything, to do that build, bake, and boot process. From there, we've got Ansible as the orchestration tool for those configuration scripts. And then in terms of the agents that we've got on the box to incorporate monitoring, we've got New Relic there for an APM, and we've got Splunk for the ability to do your dashboarding. And we also leverage CloudWatch to do a lot of the alerting and alarming stuff. Yeah, I think, does that answer most of those? Testing, so that one there we've got Newman. So that allows us to develop within Postman and export those to an automated test suite. One of the other ones was a lot of the web interfaces can't be done through a tool like that, so we use Selenium for that.